I slept with my boss once, and that cost me everything I worked for. I got my job at a commercial real estate firm when I was 27. It took me 3 years of applying to different companies before anyone gave me a chance. I didn't go to a fancy school. I went to a state university on financial aid and graduated with a degree in business administration that nobody in the industry seemed to care about. I didn't have connections. My parents owned a dry cleaning business. Nobody in my family had ever worked in an office with a lobby. I got in because I was persistent, and because I interviewed well, and because the hiring manager at the time said I had more energy than anyone she'd spoken to that month. Her name was Gloria, and she retired 2 years later. Before she left, she told me, "Don't let anyone in this building make you feel like you got lucky. You got in because you earned it. Remember that when things get hard." I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I do now. I worked hard from day one. I stayed late, came in early, volunteered for projects nobody wanted, and within 2 years, I was managing my own accounts. I learned the commercial leasing market inside and out. I memorized zoning codes. I studied every comparable sale in the metro area going back 5 years. I made myself the person people came to when they had a question nobody else could answer. By the time I was 31, I was one of the top performers on my floor. I had closed more deals that year than anyone in the division except one senior director who had been there for 12 years. My boss was a man named Irving. He ran the commercial division. He was 44, divorced, well-liked, and the kind of guy who remembered everyone's name and asked about their kids. He was good at his job, and he made people feel comfortable. When he walked into a room, people straightened up, not out of fear, out of respect. He was the one who approved my promotion to senior associate. He told me I'd earned it and that he was proud to have me on his team. I believed him. In October of last year, the company had its annual gala. Open bar, live music, everyone dressed up. I went with a few coworkers. Irving was there. We talked most of the night, not about work, about music, about travel, about a documentary we'd both seen. He was funny. He was warm. He made me feel like the only person in the room, which I now understand is a skill and not a compliment. After the gala, a group of us went to a bar down the street. People peeled off one by one until it was just me and Irving. I knew what was happening. He knew what was happening. We went back to his apartment. I'm not going to pretend I was tricked. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't pressured. I made a choice. A bad one, but a choice nonetheless. And I own that completely. I don't tell this story as a victim of that night. I tell it as a victim of what came after. The next morning, I left early. I sat in my car in his parking garage for 10 minutes before I turned the key. I stared at myself in the rearview mirror and said out loud, "That was stupid." And then I drove home and showered and went about my weekend and told myself it would be fine. People make mistakes. Adults move on. Monday at work, Irving acted completely normal. He nodded at me in the hallway the same way he always did. No lingering looks, no awkward energy. He didn't pull me aside. He didn't send a text. It was like it never happened. I figured that was best. I figured we were two adults who made a bad call on a night with too much wine and too little judgment, and we were both choosing to leave it behind. I was wrong. He wasn't leaving it behind. He was filing it away. 2 weeks later, Irving called me into his office and closed the door. He told me a new director position was opening up in January. He said I was the strongest candidate and that he was going to recommend me. Then he said, "But we should probably keep seeing each other. It'd be nice to have someone in that role I'm close with." I didn't respond right away. He smiled and said he was half joking, but the way he said it made it clear which half he meant. I told him the gala was a one-time thing and that I didn't want to continue anything. He leaned back in his chair and said that was fine. Totally fine. His exact words were, "No pressure at all." The director position went to a man named Colby, who had been at the company for 8 months. 8 months. I had been there 4 years. I had trained 2 of the associates on his team. I had closed more revenue that quarter than his entire group combined. Colby was fine at his job, but nobody on the floor would have picked him over me. Nobody. When the announcement went out in the company email, 3 people on my floor came to my desk separately and said variations of the same thing. "That should have been you." One of them, a woman named Dana, said it with a look on her face that told me she suspected something but didn't want to say it. I went to Irving and asked him what happened. He said the leadership team decided to go in a different direction. I asked what direction. He said Colby brought a different energy. I asked him if this had anything to do with our conversation. He looked at me and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." That sentence changed everything. He wasn't going to acknowledge it. Not the night, not the offer, not the connection between what he asked for and what I didn't get. It all disappeared the second I became inconvenient. I went home that night and sat on my couch for a long time. I thought about quitting. I thought about reporting him. I thought about pretending none of it happened and just moving on. None of those options felt right. If I quit, I lost 4 years of work. If I reported him, it would be my word against his. And he had 15 years of goodwill built up at that company. If I pretended it didn't happen, I'd be doing exactly what he wanted. So I did the one thing Irving didn't expect. I stayed. I didn't quit. I didn't transfer. I didn't shrink. I didn't cry in the bathroom. I didn't gossip with coworkers about what happened. I came in every day and did my job better than anyone on that floor. I took on the hardest accounts, the ones that had been sitting dead for months with no movement, a warehouse conversion in the industrial district that nobody wanted to touch because the zoning was a nightmare. I got it rezoned and closed the deal for $1, $2 million, a retail space on 4th Street that had been vacant for a year because the landlord was impossible. I got him to agree to a modified triple net lease that nobody on the floor thought was possible. I closed deals that made people on other floors ask, "Who is she?" I made myself impossible to ignore, not for Irving, for everyone above him. I wanted the people who actually ran the company to see my name so many times on the deal reports that they'd start asking why I was still a senior associate. I wanted them to look at my numbers and then look at the people above me and wonder how that math worked. In March, our regional VP came down for quarterly reviews. Her name was Odette, and she had a reputation for being direct. She sat with every senior senior associate for 15 minutes. When she got to me, she looked at my numbers and said, "Why aren't you a director?" I said I didn't know. She said she'd look into it. 2 weeks later, Odette called me directly. She said she had reviewed the last promotion cycle and couldn't find a single documented reason why I had been passed over. She said Colby's file was thin. His numbers were average. His client retention rate was below the division median. She said, "Someone made a judgment call that doesn't match the data. I want to understand why." I told her I didn't want to speculate. She said, "I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm asking you to tell me the truth." I sat with that for a moment. Then I told her, not all of it, not the night, not the apartment. I told her about the conversation in Irving's office, the suggestion that keeping things going between us would be good for my career, the exact words he used. It'd be nice to have someone in that role I'm close with. And I told her what happened after I said no. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you have anything in writing?" I said no. It was a closed-door conversation. No witnesses, no emails, no texts. He was too smart for that. Odette said, "That makes things harder, but it doesn't make them impossible." I didn't hear anything for 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, everything at work got worse. I don't know if Irving found out about the call or if someone tipped him off, but his behavior shifted. It was subtle at first. He stopped including me in client meetings I'd been part of for 2 years. My name disappeared from the internal newsletter that highlighted top closers, even though I had the best quarter on the floor. He reassigned one of my biggest accounts to Colby without telling me. I found out when the client emailed asking why there was a new point of contact. I forwarded that email to Odette without a word. Then came the performance review. Every year our reviews were straightforward. You sat down with your division head, and they went through your numbers and your client feedback and gave you a rating from 1 to 5. I had never gotten below a 4. Irving gave me a 2. A 2. He sat across from me with a straight face and said my collaborative energy had declined, and that several team members had raised concerns about my attitude. I asked which team members. He said the feedback was anonymous. I asked what specific incidents warranted a 2. He said it was a pattern, not a single incident. I asked him to name one example from the pattern. He couldn't. He just said, "It's about the overall picture," and moved on. A 2 meant I was ineligible for the next promotion cycle. It meant my bonus would be cut by 40%. It meant there would be a paper trail suggesting I was declining when the reality was the opposite. It meant that if I ever tried to leave and a new employer called for a reference, they would see a downward trend that didn't exist 6 months ago. I was being erased in slow motion, and the man doing it was smiling at me the whole time, using the same warm voice he used when he told me he was proud to have me on his team, the same voice he used the night of the gala, the same voice he used when he said, "No pressure at all." That voice was a weapon. I just didn't know it until it was pointed at me. I went home that night and opened my laptop and started building a file, not out of anger, out of survival. I pulled every email Irving had ever sent me, every performance review from the past 4 years, every metric report with my name on it. I printed my deal log showing $2.7 million in closed transactions for the quarter. I pulled Colby's numbers from the shared dashboard. He had closed $940,000, less than half of mine. I screenshotted the internal newsletter archives showing my name featured every quarter for 3 years straight and then disappearing the exact month I turned Irving down. I organized it all in a folder on my desktop and labeled it insurance. The next week, I got a call from someone in HR named Priya. She said she was conducting a routine review of the commercial division's recent promotion decisions and asked if I had time to chat. It wasn't routine. I could hear it in her voice. She was careful and precise, and she asked questions that were clearly designed to build a timeline. She asked me when I was first told about the director position. She asked who told me. She asked if anyone had suggested the promotion was contingent on anything other than performance. I answered everything honestly. Then she asked if I had experienced any changes in my work assignments or evaluations following the promotion decision. I told her about the reassigned accounts, the missing newsletter credits, the 2 rating. She asked if I had documentation. I said, "How much do you need?" I sent her the entire folder. 2 days later, Irving was pulled into a meeting that lasted 4 hours. He came out looking gray. He didn't speak to anyone. He went straight to his office and closed the door and stayed there until everyone else on the floor had gone home. I was still at my desk finishing a proposal when I saw his light turn off. He walked past me without a word. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He didn't look at me at all. That was the first time Irving had ever not acknowledged me in a room, and it told me everything I needed to know. The following Monday, a company-wide email announced that Irving was transitioning out of his leadership role to pursue new opportunities. The language was corporate, but the message was clear. He wasn't transitioning. He was being removed. There was no farewell party, no team lunch, no speech about how much he'd missed the company. He just stopped being there one day like a light switch. His office was cleaned out by Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, someone from facilities had already removed his nameplate from the door. 15 years at the company, and it took 48 hours to erase him completely. The same way he tried to erase me. Except it took him months, and it took the company 2 days. People on the floor reacted in different ways. Some of them were shocked because they genuinely liked Irving and couldn't imagine him doing what he did. Some of them were quiet in a way that told me they weren't surprised at all. A few people sent me small signals. A nod in the elevator. A coffee left on my desk with no note. One of the junior associates, a woman named Kim, sent me an email that just said, "Thank you," with no context. I didn't reply, but I saved it. Colby was reassigned to a lateral role in a different division. Nobody explained why publicly, but everyone on the floor knew something had happened. The whispers were loud, and they followed me everywhere. Some people looked at me differently. A few of them with sympathy. A few of them with suspicion. One guy on the floor named Derek made a comment in the break room that someone overheard. He said, "Funny how she ends up with the promotion after all that." He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. That's the part they don't tell you about these situations. Even when you're the one who was wronged, some people will always wonder if if you caused it, if you played a part, if you invited it, if you could have just kept quiet and let it go. They don't see the performance review that was weaponized against you. They don't see the accounts that were taken away. They don't see the 4-hour meeting that uncovered things that had been happening in that building long before you ever walked through the door. They just see the woman and the outcome, and they fill in whatever story makes them comfortable. I heard through a coworker that Irving told a few people I had exaggerated a misunderstanding and that he was pushed out over politics. He never said my name. He didn't have to. Everyone knew. A woman on my floor named Janet came up to me the week after Irving left. She didn't say much. She just said, "It happened to me too, 3 years ago." I didn't say anything because I didn't think anyone would listen. She walked away before I could respond. I sat at my desk for a long time after that, thinking about how many Janets there were in that building, how many women sat in Irving's office and heard some version of the same pitch, how many of them said yes because they thought they had to, how many of them said no and watched their careers stall and never understood why, how many of them left the company entirely and told themselves it was their choice when really they were just tired of fighting something they couldn't prove. I wasn't the first. I was just the first one who had someone like Odette in a position to actually do something about it. And I was the first one stubborn enough to stay on the floor and keep closing deals while the man who wronged me was trying to bury me with a performance review and a reassigned client list. Gloria told me to remember that I earned my place here. I remembered. That's the only reason I survived it. In June, Odette offered me the director position, not Colby's old role, a newly created one. She said the commercial division needed restructuring and she wanted someone with institutional knowledge and backbone. I accepted. My first week as director, I sat in the same office Irving used to occupy. Same desk, same chair, same view of the floor through the glass wall. Someone from facilities asked if I wanted to redecorate. I said no. I wanted to sit in that chair and feel the weight of what it meant to be there. Not because of what Irving did in that room, but because of what I was going to do differently. I could see everyone working at their stations, and I thought about how Irving must have sat in this exact chair and watched people the way a chess player watches the board, deciding who to move, who to sacrifice, who to keep close, who to punish for saying no. I reorganized the team evaluations to require 2 independent reviewers instead of 1. No single person would ever have the power to tank someone's career with a number and a closed door again. I made all promotion criteria transparent and published them on the internal dashboard, so everyone could see exactly what metrics they needed to hit. No more different energy. No more vague feedback about collaborative attitude. If you hit the numbers, you moved up, period. I required documentation for every rating below a 3. If a manager wanted to give someone a 2, they had to justify it with specific examples, dates, and corroborating input from at least one other team lead. These weren't radical changes. They were basic accountability measures that should have been in place years ago. The fact that they weren't told me more about the company than Irving ever did. It told me that the system wasn't broken. It was built this way. It was built to let people like Irving thrive because nobody thought to ask what happened behind the closed door as long as the numbers looked good. Odette called me after my first month. She said the floor's numbers were up 18%. She said 3 senior associates who had been considering leaving decided to stay after seeing the new evaluation structure. She said, "You're doing exactly what I hired you to do." I said, "You didn't hire me. I was already here. You just stopped letting someone else block the door." She laughed. I didn't. Irving reached out to me once. A LinkedIn message about 2 months after he left. It said, "No hard feelings. I hope we can be professionals about this. I always respected your work." I read it twice. I always respected your work. Not me. My work. Even in his version of an olive branch, he couldn't see me as a person. Just an output. A number. A deal closed. I didn't respond. I didn't block him either. I just let the message sit there unread on his end so he'd have to wonder whether I saw it or whether I had already forgotten he existed. Some people deserve the silence. Not as punishment. As truth. Irving had spent 15 years making people feel like they were the only person in the room. He did it at meetings. He did it at galas. He did it in his office with the door closed. And every single time it was a transaction disguised as a connection. I was 31 years old, and I thought a man who remembered everyone's name was the same thing as a man who cared. Those are not the same thing. Remembering someone's name costs nothing. Caring about someone's career when it doesn't benefit you is where character starts. Irving didn't have character. He had charm, and charm is just manipulation wearing a better suit. Last week I promoted a woman named Jinky to senior associate. She's 28. She's been at the company for 2 years. She works harder than anyone on the floor, and she reminds me of myself when I first started. Same energy, same hunger, same habit of staying late when everyone else has gone home because she knows the work won't do itself. I called her into my office and told her she earned it. I told her that her numbers were the best on the floor and that 3 different clients had specifically requested her by name. She got emotional and said, "I didn't think anyone was paying attention." I said, "I was. That's my job, and it's the only reason I'm sitting in this chair." And I meant it. Not the way Irving meant things. Not as a setup, not as leverage, not as a transaction wrapped in warmth. I meant it the way it's supposed to be meant. Someone did good work, and someone else noticed, and that's it. No strings, no closed doors, no half jokes with a full meaning behind them. Just a woman telling another woman that her effort mattered, and that she didn't have to trade anything to be seen, that she didn't have to give up a piece of herself to move forward, that the work was enough, that she was enough. That's the job now. That's what it's supposed to look like. I know because I learned what it looks like when it doesn't. One night at a gala taught me that. One conversation in a closed office confirmed it. And one woman named Odette proved that the system doesn't have to work that way if the right people decide it shouldn't. I slept with my boss once. It cost me a promotion, almost cost me my career, and taught me more about power than 4 years of closing deals ever did. But it didn't cost me everything, not even close, because everything I worked for is still right here. My name is on the door now, and I earned it the hard way, the only way that counts.